Before the Treaty of Fort Wayne, Indiana, Tecumseh was relatively known to outsiders who usually referred to him as the prophet's brother. Afterwards, he emerged as a prominent figure as he built an intertribal confederacy to counter the U.S. expansion. In August of 1810, Tecumseh met with William Henry Harrison at Vincennes, the capital of Indiana Territory, a standoff that became legendary. Tecumseh demanded that Harrison rescind the Fort Wayne cessions and said he would oppose American settlement on the disputed land. He said the chiefs who had signed the treaty would be punished and that he was uniting the tribe to prevent further cessions. Harrison insisted that the land had been purchased fairly and that Tecumseh had no right to object because Native Americans did not own the land in common. Harrison said he would send Tecumseh's demands to President James Madison, but did not expect the president to accept them. As the meeting concluded, Tecumseh said that if Madison did not rescind the Fort Wayne Treaty, you and I will fight it out. After the confrontation with Harrison, Tecumseh traveled widely to build his Confederacy. He went westward to recruit allies amongst Potawatomis, Winnebags, Sacs, Foxes, Kickapoos, and Missouri Shawnee. In November of 1810, he visited Fort Mountain in Upper Canada to ask British officials for assistance in a coming war. But the British were non-committal, urging restraint. In May of 1811, Tecumseh visited Ohio to recruit warriors amongst the Shawnee, Wyandots, and Senecas. After returning to Prophetstown, he sent delegation to Araucanians in New York. In July of 1811, Tecumseh again met Harrison at Vincennes. He told the governor he had amassed a confederacy of northern tribes and was heading south to do the same. For the next 6 months, Tecumseh traveled some 3,000 miles in the south and west to recruit allies. The documentary evidence of this journey is fragmented and was exaggerated in folklore, but he probably met with Chickasaws, Choctaws, Muskogee, Osages, Western Shawnee, Delawares, Sacs, Foxes, Sioux, Kickapoos, and Potawatomis. He was aided in his efforts by two extraordinary events: the Great Comet of 1811 and the New Madrid earthquake, which he and other Native Americans interpreted as omens that his Confederacy should be supported. Many reject his overtures, especially in the South, most notably the Choctaws and Chippewas. His most receptive Southern listeners were among the Muskogee, a faction amongst Muskogee who became known as the Red Sticks, responded to Tecumseh's call of arms, contributing to the coming of the Creek War. According to Sutterton, Tecumseh had made a serious mistake by informing Harrison he would be absent from Prophetstown for an extended time. Harrison wrote that Tecumseh's absence affords the most favorable opportunity for breaking up his Confederacy. In September 1811, Harrison marched toward Prophetstown with about 1,000 men. In the pre-dawn hours on November 7th, warriors from Prophetstown launched a surprise attack on Harrison's camp, initiating the Battle of Tippecanoe. Harrison's men held their own ground, after which the Prophet's warriors withdrew and evacuated from Prophetstown. The Americans burned the village the following day and returned to Vincennes. Historians have traditionally viewed the Battle of Tippecanoe as a devastating blow to the Tecumseh Confederacy. According to a story recorded by Benjamin Drake 10 years after the battle, Tecumseh was furious with Tecumseh after the battle and threatened to kill him. Afterwards, it was said that the prophet played little part in the Confederacy's leadership. Modern scholarships cast doubt on his interpretation. Dowd, Cave, and Joyner argued that the stories of Tecumseh's disgrace originated with Harrison's allies and are not supported by other sources. According to this view, the battle was a setback for Tecumseh, but he continued to serve the Confederacy's spiritual leader, with Tecumseh as his diplomat and military leader. Harrison hoped preemptive strikes would subdue Tecumseh's Confederacy, but a wave of frontier violence erupted after the battle. Native Americans who had fought at Tippecanoe sought revenge, killing as many Americans as they could find. Tecumseh sought to restrain the warriors from premature action while preparing the Confederacy for future hostilities. By the time the United States declared war on Great Britain in June of 1812, as many as 800 warriors had gathered across the rebuilt Prophetstown. Tecumseh's Native American allies throughout the Northwest Territory were now numbering about 3,500. In June of 1812, Tecumseh arrived at Fort Madison in Amherstburg to join his cause with the British in the War of 1812. The British had few troops and scant resources to the west, so native allies were essential to the defense of Upper Canada. The British quickly recognized Tecumseh as the most influential of all Indian allies and relied upon him to direct the native forces. He and his warriors scouted and probed enemy positions as American General William Hull crossed into Canada and threatened to take Fort Madison. On July the 25th, Tecumseh's warriors skirmished with America north of Amherstburg, inflicting the first American fatalities of that war. Tecumseh turned his attention to cutting off Hull's supply and communication lines on the U.S. side of the border, south of Detroit. On August the 5th, he led 25 warriors in two succession ambushes, scattering a far superior force. Tecumseh captured Hull's outgoing mail, which revealed that the general was fearful of being cut off. On August the 9th, Tecumseh joined with the British soldiers at the Battle of Tippecanoe, successfully thwarting Hull's attempt to reopen his line of communication. 2 days later, Hull pulled the last of his men from Amherstburg, ending his attempt to invade Canada. On August the 14th, Major General Isaac Brock, British commander of Upper Canada, arrived at Fort Madison and began preparations for attacking Hull at Fort Detroit. Tecumseh, upon hearing of Brock's plans, reportedly turned to his companions and said, "This is a man." Tecumseh and Brock formed an immediate friendship that served to cement the alliance. Brock's high esteem for Tecumseh likely contributed to a popular belief that Tecumseh was appointed a brigadier general in the British Army, though this is a myth. Tecumseh led about 530 warriors in the siege of Detroit. According to one account, Tecumseh had his men repeatedly pass through the opening of the woods to create the impression that thousands of Native Americans were outside the fort, a story that may be apocryphal. To almost everyone's astonishment, Hull decided to surrender. Brock wrote of Tecumseh, "He who attracted most of my attention was a Shawnee chief named Tecumseh, brother to the prophet, who for the last 2 years has carried on, contrary to our remonstrances, an active warfare against the United States. A more sagacious or more gallant warrior does not, I believe, exist. He was the admiration for everyone who conversed with him." Brock likely assured Tecumseh that the British would support Native American land claims. He wrote his superiors that restoration of land fraudulently usurped from the Native Americans should be considered in any peace treaty. News of Detroit's capture revived British discussions of creating an Indian barrier state to ensure the security of Upper Canada. After this short stay in the area, Brock returned to the Niagara frontier, where he was killed in action several weeks later. Meanwhile, the British had negotiated a temporary armistice and called off further offensives. Tecumseh was frustrated by the unexpected British-American resistance, which came at a time when his Confederacy was attacking American forts and needed their support. In September 1812, he and Roundhead led 600 warriors to assist in an attack on Fort Wayne, but the siege failed before they arrived. Any siege against Fort Harrison also failed. Tecumseh stayed in Prophetstown region for the remainder of 1812, according to all Native American war efforts.